Welcome to the Fear and Greed Afternoon Report for Friday the 30th of September 2022. I'm Sean Aylmer. Every afternoon we've got the 5 stories that happened today that you need to know about. Story number 1. It was a bad day on the ASX with most stocks falling. The consumer discretionary stocks, think retailers, tech companies, industrials and financials all fell sharply. By the close of trading, the S&P ASX 200 finished down 1.2% to 6,474 points. There were big drops among the big banks, with Commonwealth Bank, Westpac and ANZ all tumbling around 2.5%. Macquarie Group dropped more than 4%. Transurban tumbled 3.8% and Wesfarmers fell 3%. The companies that did okay were the materials and energy companies. Rio Tinto jumped nearly 3%. Santos and BHP climbed around 1%, a bit more than that. Fortescue and Woodside also ended higher. There's a mixed bag in terms of the worst performers. Carsales.com, hearing implant group Cochlear, dealership Eagers Automotive and tech companies Pro Medicus and WiseTech Global were the 5 worst performers. The best tended to be the gold stocks, reflecting a rising price in the precious metal. Newcrest Mining led the way, up nearly 3%. The Aussie dollar finishes the week trading just a touch above 65 US cents and oil prices are up a bit. Story number 2. The big story today out of Canberra comes from the meeting of the National Cabinet. Isolation rules for people who have tested positive for COVID-19 have been scrapped from October 14. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called on people to make their own decisions if they tested positive, though some restrictions will remain in high-risk environments, including disability, aged and healthcare. It also means COVID isolation payments will cease. It marks the end to Australia's emergency response period to the pandemic, though Chief Medical Officer Paul Kelly said the virus will be around for many years yet. But he said the high vaccination rate and current phase of the pandemic means the decision is sensible, though not everyone agrees with that. New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet was the main sponsor of the decision, saying it was time for people to take some personal responsibility. Story number 3. Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk has scrapped the state's controversial multi-jurisdictional land tax after a flood of criticism from within and outside politics. The land tax was to be levied on investors for owning properties in other states, so a Victorian owning a property in Queensland would have to pay the tax. Some states were deliberately hindering the new tax. For example, New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet said his state wouldn't hand over property data. Discussions between the premiers last night ahead of today's National Cabinet meeting convinced Ms Palaszczuk to dump the tax. Everyone seems happy about that one. Story number 4. The Australian Federal Police has set up Operation Guardian to help protect people most at risk of identity fraud as a result of the cyber attack on Optus a week ago. Almost 10 million people's data has been compromised. Affected customers will receive multi-jurisdictional and multi-layered protection from identity crime and financial fraud. The cause of the hack still remains a mystery, with Optus insisting it was sophisticated, but the government saying it was a simple hack. Who knows? Today, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said Optus will pay for passports that must be replaced because of the breach. And finally, story number 5. It's been a shocking week for global financial markets. The news got no better over the past 24 hours. Wall Street's benchmark S&P 500 closed down more than 2% this morning to its lowest level in almost 2 years after strong jobs data reinforced expectations that the Federal Reserve will stick to its plan to keep lifting interest rates in the world's biggest economy. Some stocks that had held up relatively well, notably Apple and Tesla, were hammered, falling 5% and 7% respectively. In Europe, German inflation figures showed that prices spiked to nearly 11% in the last 12 months, sending markets across the region lower, and today Asian markets traded lower. It's all because of fears of a recession across major markets and little sign of easing in oil and energy prices, thanks of course to the war in Ukraine. That's it for the afternoon report for Friday the 30th of September 2022. Don't forget to hit follow on the podcast and find Fear and Greed on LinkedIn, Twitter and Facebook. Join Michael Thompson and I tomorrow morning for the weekend edition of Fast 5 by Fear and Greed. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your evening.